NFL Scouting Combine behind us now as we inch closer to the new NFL league year, and that means free agency. I'm Kevin Carroll. Welcome to the Buffalo End Zone podcast, everyone, along with Andy Young, as usual. And I know we say this all the time, Andy, but there's no real off time when you're covering the NFL, but it's always exciting. Like, even, you know, the Super Bowl's behind us. We go to the NFL Combine, see the future of the NFL, but now you have free agency just around the corner, and you look at your team and the needs that they have and what might be, and then all that takes place, and then the draft comes up.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at it, we took, 2 weeks off after the Super Bowl, after the Bills were eliminated.
Yeah.
And then we were off to the Combine, and there's just that very little period in there, a week or so. But even in that time, it's the lead up to the Combine and who's going to run well and all the talk there. So you're right. The NFL never sleeps, really doesn't. Maybe for a couple of weeks in July. That's about it.
Yeah, I think you're right.
People take a little vacation, get their golf games in before they head to training camp.
If your team's in the news in July, it's usually not for a good reason.
Right. And, you know, there's still plenty of stuff to talk about, what's going to happen in training camp, but that's a long way away. We've got free agency coming up. New league year starts Wednesday, March 12th, the legal tampering period when agents can discuss contract parameters with teams leading into the new league year begins a couple of days before that. So won't be long before we start hearing some news about potential free agent signings for the Bills and other teams around the league.
Yeah, little things happen here and there as we lead up to it. Khalil Shakir gets his extension. We see, I think, Max Crosby and the Raiders. There's a report that he just agreed to an extension. So anyone with hopes,
that's off the table.
With anyone with hopes on Max Crosby becoming a Buffalo Bill, that is gone now. But the Bills have their players headed to free agency, players that are out there they could be targeting. And that's really what we're doing here, Andy, is getting a look at that. And as the week goes on, as we head up to the new league year, like you said, you're just going to hear more and more, like, this is going to happen, this is going to happen. But it's a great kickoff point. You know, I told you offline before we started, this really isn't my cup of tea. Like, I'm a game guy. I like the games. I like the strat. I like football. The money and the salary cap and all that stuff. Maybe some may say I'm just lazy and don't feel like putting in the work, but
you like Madden. Do you do franchises on Madden?
No, I have the computer auto everything.
See, that's it. But like half, I would say at least half the hardcore football fans, for some people, I honestly believe they like this time of the year more so than they care about the actual games, because when you're in this time of year, it's all speculation. It's all futures. It's all what it could be. And then once you're in the season, it's more of, all right, here's what it is. Right? So people like to dream. They like to think they hit the lottery or they outsmarted somebody. They like the machinations of, all right, who can we trade for? Who can we cut? Who can we pick? Speaking of cuts, remember last year at this time, we were a couple of weeks away, a week or so away from that huge day of cuts by the Bills when they said goodbye to Trey White, Jordan Poyer, Mitch Morse, not far from saying goodbye to Stephon Diggs. This is a little bit of a different offseason this year. Bills still have some work to do. So as we begin this free agency primer, we'll talk a little bit about their cap space to begin with. Brandon Beane said last week at the Combine that they've still got some work to do. According to Mike Giannetti, our good buddy at SpotTrack.com, they're still about $10 million over the salary cap as we head towards the new league year. Now, that's going to take some cuts, some restructures, that sort of thing. They can free up some money, whether that's cutting a guy like Von Miller or getting him to agree to another pay cut so they can free up some money there. They can free up some money by extending guys or restructuring their contracts. Candidates for that: Josh Allen, Deion Dawkins, Ed Oliver, guys who aren't going to go anywhere anytime soon, so you don't mind kicking the can down the road a little bit. That could free up like $30 million and get them in a good spot right there without any other moves. That could get them cap compliant.
And I think they're in a better spot this year than they were last year.
Certainly. They were like 40-some million over the cap at this point last year.
Yeah, so to be sitting around where they are right now, and again, this stuff will come quick as we inch closer because they got to They got to get under the cap. They have to do all that kind of stuff. And it's just so funny, something might come our way while we're sitting out here right now. I always remember, actually, when free agency started, the Von Miller news broke. Well, John Scott and I then were here, and we couldn't believe it. Like, we were floored when that happened. So, it's the NFL. Anything can happen at any moment.
As soon as we finish recording this and it goes on YouTube and Facebook and wherever else, there'll be a move. And it'll make all that we discussed moot, right?
Yeah.
There'll be a trade or a release, something of that nature. But I think we wanted to get started before we dive into the pending unrestricted free agents from other teams. Let's talk about the Bills guys who they may or may not bring back, and you and I can have a discussion about if they should bring these guys back and kind of at what cost.
Yeah, so we'll start with the offensive side of the ball because the offense is cool.
But as we saw, defense wins championships.
Absolutely, and that needs to be the Bills' focus this offseason. But, of course, Amari Cooper came over before the trade deadline last year, wide receiver. And the other wide receiver is Mac Hollins. Andy, you're looking at two different guys here. Amari Cooper has that pedigree of, he was brought in to be the A1 receiver. I don't think we got that from him. I'm fine with the team moving on from him. He's over 30 years old right now. Mac Hollins is over 30 years old. But, I mean, his salary way lower. I think Mac Hollins is a good locker room guy. And for someone who is critical of Mac Hollins early in the year, I want them to bring him back. Whoops.
This is a podcast. Let it rip.
He was one of the positives, him and James Cook, in the game against the Chiefs.
Yeah.
With at least a couple of catches, that one touchdown.
I would be okay with, at the right price, bringing Amari Cooper back, especially if you're not able to make another move for another outside boundary ZX type wide receiver.
Right.
Because that is still a position of need. We don't know. The jury's still out on Keon Coleman, right? Mm-hmm. And he's not a speed guy. I don't think at his point in his career that Amari Cooper is a speed guy, but he certainly brings some value to what you can do. Maybe with a full offseason with Joe Brady, getting chemistry with Josh Allen, he can be used in some way. I don't want to rely on him as he is your number one. I thought after the first game he played last season, we were heading down that road, right?
Right.
And you could get a couple of years out of him as a number one if you wanted to re-sign him. I think he could serve a role on this team. Spot Track has his calculated market value at $14 million. That seems high, right? Do you want to pay that for him, given the production he gave you and the fact that he's 30 years old and going to be 31?
I don't know.
Right price. If you can get him back for
the right
10 or
price,
$12 million, maybe.
Because I do agree with this, that just his presence on the field at time, I think, is kind of what opened up the passing game a little bit. Like, his arrival, it was no coincidence that when he was out there, before he showed up, we were constantly talking about these guys can't get separation. They're never open. And they basically are catching the ball and getting tackled right away if they make the catch. Then Amari Cooper shows up, and that kind of freed up the offense and other players at the wide receiver position.
I think in some ways it kind of slotted everybody down a little, maybe a half a role, which was good for a lot of them, especially for a guy like Keon Coleman, for a Mac Hollins, who was very versatile, Curtis Samuel. All these guys kind of slotted into a better spot there. Mm-hmm. Khalil Shakir is your given at this point.
Right.
He's good. They just re-signed him. He's going to be here for a long time. I think he's an ascending player. But whether you bring back Coleman or a Cooper or not, you've got to address that outside starting wide receiver position. They didn't play him a ton, especially down the stretch. There were only a few games where he was given a lot of targets.
And the hand injury, too,
I
think
he was
played
hurt.
A role.
Coleman was hurt. We know injuries played a heck of a role with a lot of guys on offense last season that seemed to not live up to expectations, if you're talking Kincaid, Coleman, and then Cooper and what he dealt with. So I think he really enjoyed his time here. He liked being here. We talked to him a couple of different times when he said, I've been dreaming of this my whole career, to be on a team like this.
Yeah.
That has a chance to be a winner and isn't selfish. So I think for the right price, he comes back. 14, 15 million seems steep to me.
Mm-hmm.
But if you can get him on a good deal, I'm for bringing him back. But still thinking about addressing it in other ways.
Yeah.
Matt Collins, I think we both agree. Again,
special teams, too.
Glue guy, locker room, energy guy, special teams, led the team in touchdown catches. Let's not forget that.
Right.
I think, we had a lot of fun with the no shoes and the hair and all the fun stuff. He was a productive player for them, an important part. So I think for the right price, too, he's a guy you want to bring back because he's the type of glue and character guy you need.
Yeah. Reggie Gilliam, fullback.
Special teams.
Special teams guy, too.
Right price kind of thing, yep.
That's another right. I think Ty Johnson needs to be back.
We're gonna say we need to re-sign everybody if we're the Bills.
I mean, I don't know.
I want Cooper more than you do, probably. I think it sounds like.
I think Cooper didn't live up to the expectation to me, and I'd want more than Cooper. But I'm not going to disagree with your point that if they're where they're at and he's the best guy to bring back to the team, then bring him back.
Yeah.
To
your point about Ty Johnson, here's where it gets interesting. He served a massive role for this team. He was their trusted pass protection, pass situation running back. Wasn't James Cook.
Right.
Wasn't Ray Davis. Every big third down, every big long passing situation, it was him. They trust him in pass protection, and he made some big plays in the passing game and the running game. Now, is he a guy you could find elsewhere? Perhaps, especially given that James Cook wants a bigger deal.
Mm-hmm.
That all kind of ties together because James Cook, as he heads into the final year of his deal, is he a number one running back where he commands what he's put out there, a number of like $15 million a year? Well, they don't use him in that regard.
Right.
You can talk about wanting to be up there with Saquon Barkley and the fact that he scored 16 touchdowns and tied the team single-season rushing record for touchdowns in a season, but he was only on the field less than 50% of the snaps, and they weren't using him in those big key third downs. Look at the Chiefs game in the AFC Championship. Who was on the field? It wasn't James Cook on that final drive.
Right.
It's Ty Johnson. So I bring him back at the right price. He's kind of, we're going to say that a lot of times today, the right price, right? Everything is relative to what you can get for market value.
That's not our money, Andy. Let's just spend.
T-Pegs, have at it, my man. But, I mean, he's a key part, but I'm just not so sure you can't find that elsewhere. Mm-hmm. But I really liked him as a player and what he represented. Now, do they want to expand James Cook's role? More of a third down back, an every down back? Maybe that changes things.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Quentin Morris is an interesting one to me, Andy.
Another special teams ace.
Yep. I get it. But eventually, I mean, we can admit you can't bring them all back. Quentin Morris just kind of, I think you can get
He's a guy.
I think you can get another Quentin Morris or a younger, not that he's old, he's 26, but I think you can get another person to fill Quentin Morris's role.
Don't you dare slander my fellow Bowling Green State University alum, Quentin Morris. Hi, Ziggy Zumba.
How dare you?
I
just think of this list, when we look at the list on offense.
I mean, Q Morris and Reggie Gilliam, both fine in their roles.
Right.
But I think you could find them if you needed to free up some money. It was interesting. I don't think they brought Morris back on his qualifying offer because I think they could offer him a lower deal and bring him back as a UFA, as opposed to an RFA. So that's interesting about Morris. They like him. They need the blocking back. Clearly, Kincaid hasn't shown he's a blocking back. So if there's an injury, it's just Knox and him.
Yeah.
So, all right, defense. Have at it.
Let's start with Rasul Douglas. Andy, he's 30 years old now, cornerback. A couple of years ago when they went and got him, standout. I don't think he lived up to the – maybe it's a sophomore slump or whatever with the team. He just wasn't what he was the first year when he became a Buffalo Bill. But I don't know, man. Part of me just, that sticks with you, how he was when they first got him. And with him and Christian Benford, you felt comfortable out there when they were both healthy, even if Douglas wasn't popping off the page.
I liked Rasul Douglas, like you said, that first year. I think his play slipped a little bit. I think that at his age and the way the Bills have hinted and even shown in games towards the end of last season, they might be thinking a little bit about playing more man coverage and kind of switching their defensive philosophy a little bit. I don't think that's his strong suit at this point in his career. I would be okay with going younger at that position, letting him walk, and still got Kyer Elam, but I don't think he's the answer, and I don't think they do.
Right.
But do you draft somebody in the first 2 days, and that's your rookie? Do you trust a rookie, or do you go out and sign somebody? And we'll get to that shortly.
Right.
But I think Rasul Douglas, I would say, less likely to be back.
I'll agree with you on
especially at like a $12 million market valuation, according to Spot Track. I mean, they've got him at like a 3-year, $36 million contract. I don't know.
Yeah, let's stay in the defensive backfield and go with Damar Hamlin. Andy, before we get to all the defensive linemen.
This is a really interesting case.
I remember, maybe it was even last year going into the season that, there was this talk of just moving on from him anyways. I mean, there was that attachment from what happened to him on the field in Cincinnati, and I don't want to say it felt like the Bills owed him to keep him around with everything that surrounded that. But I think even going into last season, I just thought that they were going to move on and should move on from him. But then during training camp, he stood out, Andy, and delivered. But I still think that he's not ultimately the answer, especially after you had Poyer and Hyde back there for so long. It was kind of tough. I think Damar was still out of position at times and took bad angles and whatnot.
I think he just played it safe. He wasn't quite as instinctual nor as fast as some of the safeties, so he kind of just really did work to keep everything in front of him, which did allow plays to happen in front of him. He didn't get beat over the top a whole lot.
Right.
I mean, he had a nice little season for himself, given everything that he's gone through and the expectations laid upon him. I think you're probably looking at Taylor Rapp and Cole Bishop as your starting safeties next season.
Right.
Now, do they bring him back to be in the mix as a third safety? $3 million, says Spot Track. That's not horrible.
Right.
But I think for if you're going to move on from him and say that he's no longer a starter, are you wanting to pay $3 million to a backup safety? I don't know. I think you could probably, again, that's a spot where you can go younger in the draft, where you can pick up some free agents. So if you need that extra cash, that could be a chance where you might say goodbye to Damar Hamlin.
Yeah. Now that brings us to the defensive line, D-tackle, Andy, that we all agree needs an upgrade. That's the place going into this season that you need an upgrade. You have Jordan Phillips, Quentin Jefferson, Dwayne Smoot, Austin Johnson. It seems like Quentin Jefferson and Jordan Phillips, we were joking around before we came on, seems like they're Bills and then they're not Bills, but they're always good to come back if you need them.
Right.
Like what the team has run into before.
Yeah, I mean, I expect some pretty substantial changes on the defensive line. Daquan Jones is back. You could potentially cut him, make him a post-June 1st, save a little bit of money, but he's probably back. Ed Oliver, of course, is back. But you need more from that position. And I think the draft is one place where you might be able to get it in what's been called one of the better, more talented, deeper defensive line drafts in years. I think there's an opportunity there, whether that's at pick 30, whether that's in the second, third, fourth round, to continue to replenish that position. I think you need, in some regard, the heir apparent to Daquan Jones at one technique, which one technique is the guy that plays more over the center and the guard as opposed to in the gap and shoot the gap. They're more of the run-stuffing type typically, but I think you need more from that spot, whether that's a guy who can drive the pile back, whether it's a guy who can command double teams, whether that's a guy who can stand his ground, hold for the running game. And I think to get another one-technique defensive tackle, a young guy, is important. Dwayne Carter played some of that last season as a rookie, but I think the Bills probably view him more as a three-technique, which would be Oliver's backup. They need to replenish the depth there, get a little younger. They've done a lot of this kind of bargain basement stuff with their rotational defensive tackles. I think it's time to reinvest in that area. And, you know, if you want to bring back a Jordan Phillips as a depth rotational piece at a cheap deal, that's fine. I mean, Austin Johnson, he had a couple of moments. He had those picks, the 2 picks, right? That was cool for him. You don't see D tackles get a ton of picks. Quentin Jefferson, again, same deal. Like, these are, at this point in their careers, guys you can pick up off the street in the middle of the season.
Absolutely.
So you don't need to make them priorities.
So now we'll look outside of the organization on what's out there.
Here's where the fun starts.
And we'll start with the fun position, wide receiver, Andy. And we know since Stephon Diggs left, there was no alpha A1 wide receiver, and everybody eats that mentality. Work throughout the season. But again, it's the NFL. You need that A1 guy, and I don't see them. I see them going defense a lot in the draft. So now we look at what they have or what's possibly out there to bring in, and what are you willing to spend, and are you willing to swing a trade? Because now there's bigger names out there that are looking for trades on both sides of the ball, Andy. We look at the top of this list of free agent wide receivers. Chris Godwin's out there. Devontae Adams is out there.
The Jaguars are releasing Christian Kirk, which is interesting.
Yeah.
Also because he's good buddies with Josh Allen.
Oh, that's right.
They play golf. They do all sorts of things together. And he was productive when he wasn't hurt.
Yeah. And then DK Metcalf is looking for a trade out of Seattle. And Tyler Lockett has parted ways, but at almost 33 years old, I don't think Tyler Lockett's your answer there, but I'm just saying he's out there. I can't believe Brandon Cooks is still out there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at guys who can stretch the field. So let's talk about first, since this news just happened today.
Yeah.
And it's not free agency, but it's a trade, DK Metcalf. He is the exact guy you need. He is the outside, downfield, man coverage beater, speed, size, strength, all of those things that you would command in that position outside. He's exactly what they need. Do you make a swing for a DK Metcalf?
I'm telling you right now, yes, you do. I'm all in on this. It's time. And again, Josh Allen's window is not closing. The Bills' window to win a Super Bowl is not closing. But my God, isn't it time to just get past the Chiefs and get past some of these teams with a big swing? You bring in DK Metcalf, a big dude who can get down the field, has the speed and the size and everything, and then everybody can eat around him.
He's 27 years old. Won't turn 28 until December, prime of his career. I mean, that's exactly the type of player you want to have if you're the Bills, because you can still have Shakir working underneath. You can have Coleman as a big possession guy and a red zone target. And then you've got this huge 6'4", 225-pound, muscle-bound dude who can run like the Dickens.
Yep.
And boy, does that make that Bills offense scary if you've got a guy like that. Now, what does it take to get him? I mean, we saw Deebo Samuel traded for not that much this offseason. I mean, DK Metcalf is younger, but boy, oh boy, would that be something cool if the Bills had him. That probably, I mean, third-round pick, second-round pick, I don't know. You got 2 second-rounders.
Aside, yes. Do whatever to get this guy in. I mean, you look at some of the best offenses we've ever seen in the NFL. Don't you think a DK Metcalf addition with Josh Allen and the other guys they have would turn the Bills into one of those elite offenses? And I mean, the Bills' offense already putting up crazy numbers.
Mm-hmm.
But you're this guy away from being like almost unstoppable on offense.
Yeah, I mean, if you bring him in and keep him at his cap hit, it's $32 million.
Okay.
You know, so I mean, if you're trading for him, I mean, it's interesting. It's going to take some work to get a guy like that, and it probably takes you out of the market for going big game hunting for somebody like Myles Garrett or somebody on defense.
I was going to make that jump and say, for you, a big swing on offense, is that bigger than a big swing on defense?
It's hard.
Because I'm torn.
Yes.
Because while I would want DK Metcalf here, the missing part of this team right now is that defensive line and getting to the quarterback without blitzing.
Right. And that's what did we talk about all offseason? Get home with defensive line. What have we been talking about in the last month or two since the Bills were eliminated?
Oh, it's
defense.
Yeah.
It's get a stop in a big game, right?
Those third and 10 plus and the other team's getting a first down because Von Miller is 1 yard away from getting a sack when the ball's released.
Right.
You know?
Man, but it's fun to think about.
I'm more of an offensive guy anyways, right. Andy.
We were the guys who 10 years ago were like, you absolutely trade up for Sammy Watkins and you sell the farm. How did that work out?
Sammy who?
Sean McDermott and Brandon Beane are here, partially because Doug Whaley and Doug Marrone went and got Sammy Watkins.
Man, we love Sammy Watkins. But I don't know. I'm a guy. I'd rather win a game 45-38 than a defensive struggle. So I like the flashiness of the offense. You know, when the Myles Garrett thing first broke, the idea of DK Metcalf wasn't there yet. But now that it's there.
He's demanded a trade from Seattle. He's a free agent after next season. So maybe you bring him in and then you restructure him.
Right.
You free up cap space by restructuring him. You're going to sign him to a long-term deal. He's your number one for the next 4 or 5 years.
Keep selling it to me, Andy. You're making it more and more.
So you bring him in. You give him a new contract. You extend him. And then you kick the can down the road on some of that money. Give him a big signing bonus that you can prorate over the next 4 or 5 years. I don't know, man.
Oh.
A lot of chatter on social media about people going, oh, my God, go get him. But that was the same thing when people said, go get Myles Garrett. It's if you had to pick one or the other.
I'm going DK Metcalf.
I'm probably going Myles Garrett.
That's fair enough.
But it's close.
I'm literally
the idea of watching the Bills play with
like 51-49.
Right. The idea of a starting lineup of Josh Allen with their same offensive line, which they'll have.
Yep.
With James Cook, with Knox and Kincaid, Shakir, Coleman, and DK Metcalf. And then you mix in Samuel and Mac Hollins.
Right.
Woo!
I like it, Andy. This is
fun. All right, let's go to the free agents then, because we said this is a free agency primer. So we talked about Devontae Adams. That's a no for me, dog. I don't want to. I mean, if he was really cheap, but I want to get young and fast at these positions at wide receiver.
Chris Godwin is out there, Andy.
He's more of a slot, which you have, but I think he could probably play outside a little bit. He's a really good player.
My list basically ends at Chris Godwin. I mean, Christian Kirk, okay, yeah, I didn't see him. I forgot about him.
I like Christian Kirk. I think that is definitely a possibility and would be cheaper.
But again, Brandon Cooks, I can't believe he's still out there.
Here's a couple of guys that I think could be cheaper and still do the job of giving you a field stretcher. They're not alpha number one, A.J. Brown, even DK Metcalfs, Jamar Chases. However, Hollywood Brown, he's been hurt. Injuries have cost him a lot throughout his career, but he's definitely a guy who can fly.
Yep.
He's a field stretcher, and Sean McDermott talked about needing playmakers and field stretchers. Well, there's one. Darius Slayton, who has been up and down with the Giants, but he ended up being a good player for them, even though they didn't want him to be, it seemed like.
It's tough with him being on the Giants to get a good gauge on what you're getting there.
Right. And then De'Ami Brown, if you remember from the Commanders' playoff run, it wasn't always Terry McLaurin. It was Brown, who had really nice games against a couple of teams, including the Lions. So that's a possibility too. So those are some guys to keep an eye on that aren't going to break the bank, but could fit the bill, pun intended, for the field-stretching wide receiver.
I see
Josh Palmer, too, from the Chargers, another guy I kind of like. That could be a possibility.
I'm not talking about a guy who's going to change anything, but I still see KJ Osborne on the list here. And remember him from the Vikings. I know you thought I was going to mention UB, but like the Vikings, I thought he was coming along great while he was with the Vikings.
Yeah.
And then it just didn't work out that way, you know. But if you're looking at just bodies to bring in, Nelson Aguilar I could never do as we go down the list.
Here's another interesting one. Deontay Johnson. What the hell happened to him? Pittsburgh, he was a really good ascending player. Pittsburgh says we don't want him. Send him to Carolina. Carolina doesn't want him. Goes to Baltimore. Baltimore doesn't want him. Send him to the Texans. Texans don't want him.
Didn't he go back to Baltimore?
Yes. Like, I mean, what a mess.
Yeah.
So he's a really nice route runner, but, man, for whatever reason, he rubs people and teams the wrong way. Doesn't seem like the typical McDermott type, but he has talent.
Yeah. DeAndre Hopkins is there. Like, think of all the want for DeAndre Hopkins. I don't even think you'd even
it's just
take a second look.
If I'm the Bills and I'm putting a team together, it's like they said last year. I'm getting younger and I'm getting faster. And those guys are good players. If you need something in the middle of the season, you make a trade for a type like that. But, I mean, it's just not there. It's not what – if I'm building a team, I'm getting younger. I'm drafting a guy.
Yeah.
I'm making a big trade. I'm trying to get guys who bring an element of speed and explosiveness that those guys just don't quite have anymore.
Get younger and faster, but get a game changer if you can in a trade. That's why that Myles Garrett, DK Metcalf situation is like
let's go to edge then and talk about that.
All right, let's do it.
So let's say, for example, Myles Garrett doesn't happen. Andrew Berry, the Browns general manager, has reiterated several times, including at the Combine, I listened to it last week at the podium, that it's a moot point because we have no interest in trading Myles Garrett.
Right.
Could be posturing. They could get their doors blown off with a deal and make the deal.
Mm-hmm.
But let's say, for example, the Bills either can't or won't get a deal done for Myles Garrett. Let's talk about some edge UFAs. I think number one on the list for a lot of people, especially after watching the Super Bowl, Josh Sweat, Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Had a hell of a game. He's going to get paid, though. He's going to get paid pretty well, especially when the last impression is him chasing Patrick Mahomes all over the field.
Be a huge get for the Bills.
Right.
Chase Young's on there.
Man, has he not lived up to it. Former number one overall pick.
But the name is still there, and the possibility is still there. What do you got? Chase Young, 5 years in the league right now. He's still just 25 years old.
Right.
I mean, maybe just getting to a culture like the Bills would bring out, we've heard players say that especially on the defensive side of the ball, that.
Well, look at a guy like Leonard Floyd, who struggled with Chicago, was a first-round pick, never really put it together a little bit with the Rams, and then came to the Bills and had a nice year.
Mm-hmm.
Wasn't great, but he had double-digit sacks. And maybe you take a swing on a guy like that with a Chase Young, with the potential, with the pedigree, with the build that he has, and hope that your guys can get something more out of him.
Yeah.
You brought up a UB guy earlier, Malcolm Kuntz.
Oh my God!
Former UB outside linebacker, defensive end, had a nice couple of years there with the Raiders. Former third-round pick, was hurt last season, but he's a guy who you could get on a relatively cost-effective deal and bring him in. I'm sure these guys wouldn't hate it. Speaking of UB, how about Khalil Mack? Free agent. 34 years old. Does he have anything left in the tank, or is this Von Miller all over again?
Now, I am going to say this because I just happened to be walking by a radio interview with the Chargers general manager there. His name is escaping me. But he literally said they have no desire to move on from Khalil Mack, and they want him in the mix still.
Well,
so
they'll have to re-sign him then.
Right. So, I mean, I don't know if you're – I like the idea of Khalil Mack. I think that would work out here, even with his age. And you just make me feel older and older by bringing up how old Khalil Mack is.
Well, because we just talked about Sammy Watkins. Guess who was picked right after Sammy Watkins in that draft in 2014, which is now 11 years ago.
I'm going to go with Khalil Mack.
Khalil Mack. But, yeah, I mean, he last season had 6 sacks in 16 games, 2 forced fumbles. He only played 56% of the snaps for the Chargers last season. I mean, do you bring him in and he's kind of your situational guy, especially if you move on from Von Miller?
Why not take a swing at it?
I mean, he's played 17 games, 16 games the last 3 seasons. He's 2 seasons removed, so in 2023, it's 17 sacks. Is there anything left in the tank from him? Maybe. I mean, the estimated market value from Spot Track would be a 3-year contract for $70 million. That'd be about $24 million a year. Maybe. But that's not my top idea.
No.
But it could be an idea.
Matt Judon. No.
See, there's a bunch of these guys that are older.
Right.
Like, I don't love this year's free agent class.
So it's
generally
the draft looks good for those kind of positions. Free agency, not so much.
Right. So I don't like a lot of these things the Bills need, given their cap situation and what's out there. I don't know that they're going to fill all these things, but they're going to try to at least get depth at these spots.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Another guy that we saw in the AFC Championship game, Charles Omenihu. The Chiefs, he's out there. He could be a rotational defensive end piece. They've got to get more out of that position.
Absolutely.
And Greg Rousseau, there's going to be talk about whether to extend him. The guy is a good player, but he's never been consistently a great player and a game wrecker. And he's going into his 5th year, right?
That's great. Like, you would have like, there were signs of it right off the bat when he was a rookie.
Yeah.
And then it kind of, I don't even want to say leveled off. It kind of went away.
His game is sporadic. So he has a great pressure rate compared to the rest of the league. But he doesn't get home as consistently as some of the great pressure guys.
Mm-hmm.
And taking down the quarterback, we've always heard, pressure is just as good as a sack. It's not. Because if you pressure the guy but you don't sack him, he can still make a play. He can throw the ball away. He can throw the ball downfield and make a play. He can run.
Which we saw a lot of against the Bills.
If you sack him, that's it. It's a loss. So you need to get a guy who can give you double-digit sacks again. Rousseau, good player, but if you can bring in somebody else to go next to him, along with him, I think that would go a long way to helping this Bills defense, whether that's going to be a Myles Garrett or somebody like that, or you just draft somebody. You got to get more consistency there out of that group. We saw it with the Eagles.
Mm-hmm.
It's a blueprint. McDermott believes in it. We know he does. They invest in the defensive line. It's time to kind of reinvest and reinvigorate that spot.
Yeah, make a couple of better decisions there. Did we do D-tackle in that? Or
We have not.
Let's do D-tackle, and then we got to talk about the cornerback position for sure.
Yep.
D-tackle, I'm looking at some of the names. I mean, again, we just discussed this. The draft may be a better way to go right now, but you're going to need bodies, right? I mean, we talked about possibly bringing in players that could fill in or whatever down the road, but, I mean, Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, I think we need more.
Yep.
For sure.
And then you need, I mean, Daquan Jones is going into his final year of his deal. You might move on from him. He's older.
Right.
He's into his 30s. You need, as I said before, a run-stuffing, pass-pushing, pocket-pushing defensive tackle. I think you go in the draft for that. There's some guys there that can fit that bill.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're looking for tackles, like the number one guy on the market's probably going to be Milton Williams of the Eagles. Eagles, right? Defensive line. I don't know that they're going to be playing in that market. There's a few different guys. T.R. Tart. There's Bobby Brown. He's a one-technique guy, young player from the Rams.
Calais Campbell.
Calais Campbell is old. He's going to be 39 or is 39. But he's still for some reason is productive. Like, he's been good.
Yeah.
And he could fill he's huge, right? I mean, there's Sebastian Joseph Day. I mean, there's guys out there, but I mean, they're going to sign somebody. They're going to sign one of those guys or whatever. But the draft to me is where it's at.
Yeah, I think when it comes to defensive tackle that it is. It's the draft, and it's building up that position and just getting it to where it just hasn't been. It just it's that frustrating thing. Every game it felt like to me during the regular season playoffs, it was, just coming up short of getting to the quarterback and just not getting that pressure up the middle. So, yeah, I mean, cornerback, Andy.
Ben Volin, just from the Boston Globe, senior NFL writer, just said one team to watch in the DK Metcalf trade sweepstakes, Buffalo Bills.
Ooh. Now, take Ben Volin for what you want, having grown up in Boston. But, yeah,
I'm
he's
just saying.
legit. Oh, no.
I mean, we just said the same thing. The Bills should be in on that.
Nickname Trollin Volin. Might be trolling Bills fans. But, no, I mean, yeah, heck, that's awesome, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's going to be a big talking point here for the next week.
Right.
Big position of need. And we talked about potentially letting Rasul Douglas go.
Yeah.
Cornerback.
Yeah.
You're probably going to need a number 2 cornerback, whether that's this year, whether you bring back Douglas for a year or two and let a young guy learn. But, I mean, that's another spot in the draft where I think it's prime for the Bills to go. But there are some guys out there. I'll let you have the floor with the list of guys we've talked about.
And so, because you mentioned Kaiir Elam, man, it just, for a first-round pick, just no trust that that's ever going to click for him.
Nope.
At this point. Shavarius Ward, Andy, Byron Murphy. Stephon Gilmore pops out to me. I just don't. He's up there in age now. He's a former Bills draft pick. He's had success. He's still performing well for his age.
He's 35.
In the NFL, like, what was he with not the Lions?
Cowboys.
Was he with the Cowboys last year? He's still a guy you notice on the field making plays. Maybe it was like a Cowboys-Vikings game.
Yeah. Did he go to the Vikings? I can't remember.
I don't think he was with the Cowboys last year.
Maybe that was 2 years ago. I can't remember off the top of my head.
But I just don't see him. I don't see the team.
Yeah, Minnesota. That's right.
Okay.
Yep.
I don't
Dallas was the year before.
Yeah.
And then Indy, then Carolina. He's bounced around.
Yeah.
I mean, this is the guy who said, I'm glad to go to New England so my family can actually watch me on TV. Well, who gets all the primetime games now?
Exactly.
Right? I mean, my first year covering the Bills was his draft. 2012 was my first full season. I came late in 2011 back to Buffalo.
Yep.
To this station, and it's numerous iterations.
Yes.
And he was the pick, right?
That's right.
Out of South Carolina.
And he was
great.
He was great. He was great in New England.
Yep.
And he's still good.
I mean, he was Defensive Player of the Year, but that was 6 years ago now.
Right.
That seems like crazy, right? 6 years ago.
I mean, I think he had that huge play. Oh, no, that was one of the McCourty kids. But I don't see it. Bringing Dane Jackson back, that's an interesting
depth. I don't want him as the starter, but he's depth.
Right.
He knows the system.
So who on this list stands out to you? Is it, I mean,
I like Ward. I don't mind Ward. I think he's had a nice career. Murphy's fine. But they don't pop to me.
Right.
I'd rather have a rookie.
I mean, Jonathan Jones has had his moments.
Yeah.
With the Patriots.
People they soured on him though, didn't they?
Yeah.
Really really bad. I mean, to me, Ward is probably the top of the group. I mean, he was a Pro Bowler and a All-Pro second team just last season.
I don't know.
2 seasons ago.
It almost makes you think to just bring Rasul Douglas back, draft a cornerback, and deal with that down the road. Because I'm not that against Douglas.
Right. I'm not enamored with the class. So, yeah, I mean, maybe you bring back Douglas and you draft a young guy in the second or third round, and he's the heir apparent for next season. I mean, they've had success outside of Elam in developing their secondary. That's one of Sean McDermott's calling cards. Wherever he's been, and especially with the Bills, they can take guys and make them really successful. But Kaiir Elam sticks out like a sore thumb.
Oh, big time. Talk about a swing
because
and a miss.
You're not even talking about this. If that hit, you're talking about extending him and Benford, and you got 2 locked down young corners from the same draft. Think about that 2022 draft class, by the way. Kaiir Elam, and then you're talking about Cook, Shakir, Benford. I mean, what a nice class that is.
And Elam was the first round pick.
Right.
Everyone else hit,
basically
in that draft.
Yeah,
but
Balin Spector. And then, I mean, they're gonna fill in with random safeties. I think they're good at safety, but maybe they bring in somebody for depth, a veteran.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Rapp, I think he signed a 2-year deal, so this would be the second year of that and final year. And obviously, I think they're going to want Bishop to move up. I mean, they're always going to sign. Maybe they bring in a running back if they don't re-sign Ty Johnson or they draft somebody. You know what I'm saying? There's going to be other positions where they fill spots. I mean, they got to get to 90 for training camp.
Right. So, yeah, I mean, I think that hits it right there, Andy.
Yeah.
I mean, I think this DK Metcalf thing is amazing to me. That's what I'm going to be thinking about.
Dude, everybody, go on X.
Yeah.
If you're following Bills reporters and bloggers and content creators, fans, that's all anybody's talking about.
Amazingly, I'm slowly fading away from social media. I used to.
I thought you were going to just say I'm slowly fading away.
Well, obviously not, dude. If anything, I'm expanding away.
You're like the universe, expanding faster and faster. To infinity.
To infinity and beyond. But, yeah, so it's going to be a fun week, Andy. And then a little 3 and out before we go. Before that, and I know you probably don't care, but the NHL trade deadline is coming up on Friday, and the Sabres, once again, are horrible and should probably move some players and try and get.
They've lost 4 straight now. Is that correct? As we talk,
Yeah, I believe. Well, I know they've lost the last two since we got back from the combine because I've watched the last two, Monday and Tuesday.
Too bad.
It's brutal, man.
Yeah,
especially after watching that Four Nations hockey tournament. The Sabres looked like they had some juice coming out of that break, but
to watch them get rocked by the Sharks, who are the worst team in the league.
Right.
It's pathetic. They don't have the players. They don't have the front office. Who knows if they have the coaching staff with Lindy? I mean, we hear a lot of talk that it's passed him by, and he didn't get to bring in his own coaching staff. It's basically the same set of coaches that Granato had. Well, what the hell good is that? Your special teams are awful again. They're pretty good at 5-on-5. They're one of the better teams there, but any sign of trouble, any team scores a goal or two, white flag. We're getting boat raced.
And it seems like boat raced is the correct term. Not what I said a few years ago.
Motorboated. You old sailor, you.
Yep, you old sailor, you. Yeah, so I don't know. Like the NHL trade deadline used to be such a huge deal when we were covering the Sabres back in the day.
It stinks now.
Like, who are they going to add for the push to the playoffs and all that other stuff? And it's just so uninteresting. And the Sabres are uninteresting. And why are we talking about them?
Yeah, why are we talking about them on this football podcast, about the team that's really good and relevant?
It's 3-and-out, Andy. It's other things.
Well, it should just be out.
Let's get out.
I'm kidding. And you're in a spot, too, where you're going to trade away veteran players or prospects for picks. That's not what this team needs.
Right.
Unless you can swing some kind of hockey deal, but Kevin Adams has shown that rarely happens for them. I mean, they did the Byram Middlestat deal last year, and that looked like an okay thing, right? It definitely hurt their depth at center, but Byram had been playing well, but he's been playing not well lately.
Right.
Nobody's really playing great for them lately. Just when does it end with this team? Didn't you have me a few months ago go on a Sabres rant?
I did.
On this podcast? I don't want to go there again because I grew up loving the Sabres, watching the Sabres. I never played hockey, but it was like you got into it, right? They were good.
Right.
They were always around the playoffs. Then you'd have those runs to the Cup when I was like 16 years old. And
hockey games when it's warm outside.
Yeah, and then 06, 07, 05, 06, 06, 07. I mean, that was awesome. And even the few years after that when they weren't as good, but they had a President's Cup year, President's Trophy year. I mean, to see them be in this position where they're going to miss the playoffs for a 14th year and there's no end in sight.
No.
Like, they've got to clean house again. And Terry Pegula has got to get someone in charge who can, with experience, who can set up a foundation for success. I know he doesn't love the president of hockey operations model. People have reported that in this market, that he'd rather just have a GM report directly to him. But he's got to get someone with some experience that's built teams before to set up some level of sustainability and rebuild, because you're in the same spot. And they've got some young, talented players that they aren't getting the most out of, and they're on long-term deals.
Mm-hmm.
Cousins, Thompson, Dahlin, Samuelson, Power. I mean, all these dudes, the guy who wants to be here, Tuck. I mean, he could be a free agent in a year.
Right.
So, I mean,
they're a mess. I mean, we'll see what happens coming up on Friday. Andy, we did the podcast towards the beginning of the Combine last week. Your overall experience with me after 25 years in the industry, finally going out and working the Combine, not as bad as you thought it was going to be, was it? I mean, I thought it could get disastrous. You and I have butt heads before, and I was waiting for, I just can't do this, and I need Andy to do it, but it never came up.
So for those who don't know, Kevin and I have known each other for over 20 years.
Yeah.
2001 was when you came to Jamestown.
Yeah.
To work at the former Spectrum news station, which was a precursor, Cable 8 News in Jamestown. Kevin was the sports director there. I interned under Kevin there.
Yep.
When I went to Jamestown Community College. I grew up in Jamestown, New York, and Chautauqua County. So we've known each other for a long time. We push each other's buttons in certain degrees, but we work pretty well together. The longest trip we had was to London when the Bills played there in 2015. And the company had us actually room together. There were 4 of us that went. They paid for 2 rooms.
Yep.
We had to live together for a week
Oof.
in London. And we got on each other's nerves. And we had some shouting matches.
Yeah.
Both over work and food, because Kevin wants to eat at TGI Friday in London, England, and I would like to go to a pub.
Fish and chips don't do it for me.
Yeah. But anyways, so that we had that as a precedent for long trips together.
Oh, yeah.
Indianapolis was fine, but Kevin, like, you know, you're kind of taking on a little bit of a new role being out in the field more than you had. And so we weren't sure how that was going to go as far as
I did not have much confidence.
editing and shooting and all those things, but you did pretty well, and I was proud of you for that. We got through the first couple of days.
Fish for compliments. I got one. Nice.
No, you had a little hiccup at the end.
Which was funny.
That was just forgetfulness.
My worst day there was the last day after I'd been programmed my mind to just do everything like a robot to just get it in.
The crazy part about the combine is we're each shooting like 15 to 30 interviews each day and sending 10, 15-minute interviews back to the station. And we're supporting Spectrum news stations around the country. So in North Carolina and Texas and Ohio and Wisconsin and Los Angeles and Florida, all these different places. So everybody had requests for prospects they wanted, general managers they wanted to hear from their markets, coaches they wanted to hear from. And so you're just grinding. When you're us, it's 2 people. And we're shooting video of all these different press conferences.
I had a dream about it last night.
But, I mean, it's a grind, but it's a good week, too. There's some fun networking. You get to meet people. Everybody from the NFL, media, and front offices is just hanging out, right? And you might see them at a bar or at a restaurant or just walking around in the hallways. You can strike up a chat with different people. So it was a good time. We got our St. Elmo's steak, which you decided not to do.
9 p.m. is too late for this 50-year-old guy to be getting dinner. I like the early bird specials at this point.
Well, I also sandbagged it because every year, St. Elmo's Steakhouse in Indianapolis, everybody likes to go there. A lot of people do, at least. Upscale steakhouse, famous. We go there every year. And I kind of sandbagged Kevin because I said, look, it's really good, but, like, it's not the greatest thing you've ever had in your life, whatever. And so then the day of, he's like, I don't know if I'm going to go. We'll see. And then he bagged out, and then we went and had the steaks. Next morning, I see him when we go down to the combine. I'm like, dude, steak was so freaking good. I'm sorry. It was amazing. I apologize. You should have come, but
next year.
What'd you have, a little chicken quesadilla in the hotel room? Taco Bell?
I got $40 worth of Taco Bell because that's the company limit. So why not get $40 of Taco Bell?
Weren't you paying the price for it the next day, too?
Well, we don't need to get into that, but let's just say, yes, I was.
Oh, my God.
All right. Andy and I drive back. Andy also says I'm not a bad driver. Take that, my family members. What you watching as we go, Andy? Because I finally got home. I wanted to do nothing. I started watching this Netflix series called Session 81, which is about a guy who cleans videotape for a living. And then it turns into like a sci-fi horror thing where the tape he's cleaning has some weird satanic stuff on it. I'm 2 episodes in.
Okay.
And it's not really a new series, but it was just something different. I like the supernatural stuff. The not horror like slasher film, but
like science fiction kind of.
Yeah, I don't even like those jump scares, but you know,
ghosts and zombies.
You know, the devil and stuff like that. So it's an interesting series. Has a touch of The Shining to it.
Okay.
But I don't know if you're into that. It's more of probably like a Halloween time type of series.
Okay.
But holy crap, is there nothing to watch on TV most of the time?
We, in our house, have a 6-year-old who is now obsessed with WWE.
My wife tried to get me to go Monday night to, what was it, the Royal Rumble in downtown Buffalo? Raw?
Monday Night Raw.
She wanted me to get tickets. I'm like, I just can't, but go on.
So Julie and my 6-year-old, the bug has gotten him. My virus has infected him. He loves pro wrestling. I told you this story back in the fall. I took him to SmackDown in Buffalo, and he loved it, and he's just starting to really get into it. Now he's like maybe more into it than I am. He knows every character. He's talking about it constantly. He knows what time the shows are on.
I heard on the road he was talking to you about the start of it.
Yes, and so we watched Elimination Chamber, which is the big lead-in to WrestleMania.
Oh.
And one of the most shocking things in pro wrestling history happened. John Cena turned heel.
Oh!
After all these years. From Massachusetts, West Newbury.
Went to college with my brother at Springfield.
There you go.
They knew each other for a brief moment in time. Of course, John Cena went one direction.
And we're not talking about the boy band either. But, yeah, I mean, that was shocking and crazy. I mean, you're talking one of the best, most stunning heel turns of all time. He teams up with The Rock, who is his former rival, against Cody Rhodes.
The Rock is still in this?
The Rock is on the board of directors
of
TKO, WWE, the conglomerate that owns UFC and WWE. And he's kind of the evil boss. And he had asked Cody Rhodes, who's the champion, to be kind of the corporate champion. And Cody turned him down. And then The Rock put in plan B, and Cena attacked him. Beat the hell out of him with Travis Scott, the rapper.
I actually know who Travis Scott is.
Right. And so to me, it's like the NWO back in the day when Hulk Hogan turned heel, or even 10 years before that when Andre the Giant turned heel against Hulk Hogan. I mean, we're talking industry-changing stuff. So that's what we've been into. I'm a wrestling dweeb.
I know you are.
And I made my son a wrestling nerd now, too. But that's what we've been watching.
That's good. That's father and son stuff, and that's good. I like it. Andy and I are going to come back next Tuesday. I think we're
Tuesday or Wednesday. We'll see.
Yeah, with the new league year set to kick off on Wednesday at 4 in the evening. But always fun, and a lot's going to happen the second we go off the air. So we'll be back early next week with another Buffalo End Zone podcast. Before we go, what do we need to tell everybody?
We need to tell everyone. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, rate us, share, whatever it is. We appreciate it. Give us a shout out. Send us a like. Hook us up. Buffalo End Zone Podcast.
All right, everybody, as always, thanks for joining us.